good morning and welcome to First Unitarian. Please rise in body or spirit as we sing How Could Anyone? How could anyone ever tell you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Rochester. Welcome, welcome. It is so good to be together. I'm the Reverend Sherry Halliday Kwan. I'm one of the ministers that serves this congregation, but, well, I'm one of three, and truth be told, the Rochester area is just lousy with Unitarian Universalist ministers. I know. There are lots of us. And so today, leading worship, not only is Reverend Furtis here, but we've got Reverend Eileen Casey Campbell. Woo! She's preaching for us today as part of our annual not sermon series, although it is a sermon series, but pulpit swap between our three sibling congregations locally. We've also got Kathy and Sue and Pablo and the ukulele orchestra and our AV team and all of you. It wouldn't be Sunday morning without you, and I am so glad that you are here. We gather because we are a spiritual community, and through spiritual connection in community, we listen deeply to others and ourselves. We open to wonder and transformation, and we serve together with love and humility. Now, there's a lot going on in the world out there, and a lot going on inside for lots of us. And if you came here today because you're worried about yourself or someone close to you, I invite you to connect with our pastoral care team. Let us know in the chat or online, or give us a call, or connect with our pastoral care associate here on Sundays. We're a community that takes care of one another. We're a community that understands ourselves to be in relationship with other humans and all of creation. We gather here on the ancestral and contemporary land of the Seneca people, specifically the keepers of the western door of the Haudenosaunee. And we gather in acknowledgement and in opening and building relationship with the indigenous keepers of this land. All right. So, here we are. Here you are. And I'm going to invite Jamie and Jesse up with their mom, Sarah, in just a little bit to light our chalice, to gather around, maybe with mom. I invite all of you to take a comfortable breath, to know you're exactly where you are meant to be, and that nothing is required of you for the next hour, though I like when you sing loudly. And you're invited to join in our unison words. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift.
Please rise in body or spirit as we sing Standing on the Side of Love. Oh, new title, sorry. We are answering the call of love. Sorry, looking at the wrong sheet music. This might be new to some of you, it was new to me, but I want to make sure that we take some time to learn the chorus. So here's the chorus, I'll sing it one time and then invite you to join in. We are answering the call of love. And together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Let's try it. 1, 2, 3. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. One more time. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. I'm going to sing some verses. If you feel up to joining, please do. Otherwise, you got the chorus. The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are sending in the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of
My name is Kathy Ehrlich-Scheffer, and I use she, her pronouns. In my day job, I work as the director for the Women in Engineering program at RIT. And over the years, I've had students recount various gender-based incidents to me. They range from the annoying, being relegated to group secretary in an engineering project, to the more severe, such as being sexually harassed or stalked by their peers. Now, this is not exclusive to RIT. This happens literally everywhere. But I've been called, because of this, to be a Title IX advocate as a means of understanding better where gender and relating to gender is tripping up our students in the pursuit of their studies. So to review, when a student files a sort of gender-based complaint, again, wide range of what it could be, there's the student filing the complaint, and they're called the complainant, and the student being accused, called the respondent. Each of those students can opt to have a trained professional staff assigned to them to be their advocate. A Title IX advocate does a range of things with the students, anything from arranging mental health services should they need it. We help them prepare for their conduct hearing and its aftermath. We're present for investigative interviews. It can be a really weighty role. Now, as director of women in engineering, I had always assumed I saw myself as this champion for the complainant. But what I found in this process is that working with the respondents has its own reward. You see, the respondents, who, by the way, are not always male or men, they have to wrestle with the fact that they may have done harm to another human being. And they have to connect the dots of their own behavior and overlay that upon which they are being accused, and then from there, come to an understanding of how we all find ourselves in this very unfortunate and disruptive place. I've found that the role of the respondent is a very lonely one. And I've also found, at least in the less severe cases, typically more prolific cases, that it's often miscommunication, no communication, or misunderstandings that's the answer to how we all find ourselves in that unfortunate situation. Human things, because we're all human, and we all make mistakes. And sometimes we make mistakes communicating with and relating to the spectrum of genders. So I no longer like to see the conduct process as complainant versus respondent or good versus bad, at least in the less severe cases. I prefer to appreciate the humanity of all of those involved in it. And I think that's why we come to church. We come to church to find support and to support one another when we're on life's lonelier paths. And we come to church to find the humanity in our own imperfections when we make mistakes and gaffes, and we try to learn from them and do better. And we come to church to hold ourselves and each other accountable as we work to make the world a more just and equitable place.
As the ukulele orchestra gets situated, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the piece that they're going to be sharing with you. When you hear it, you'll recognize it as the Christmas tune, Carol of the Bells. And you're probably wondering, why are we doing Christmas music in January? But originally, the title of it is, it was based on a Ukrainian folk song called Shedrik, and it was a sort of blessing for the new year. The story talks about a bird, a swallow that comes to a house, kind of spreading the joys of good news of what will come once spring arrives. So it's a blessing to wish well wishes for the new year. So this is Shedrik, or Carol of the Bells.
Hello. I'm Sue Morgan, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to be telling the story today. Now, sometimes we have a carpet down here for you kids to sit on. Today, it's up here. If you want to come and join me up here on the carpet, you are welcome. It's very comfortable. Just be careful as you walk up. And you can have a seat right there. Perfect. Oh, everyone's getting very cozy. Let's make sure there's room for everyone, though. If we all stretch out, there might not be room for our last folks. I think we're good if we move these a little bit. Does everyone have a spot? Yeah? Okay. The story that I'm going to tell you today is a very old one. It comes from a time before your grandparents, great-great-grandparents were born, and even a few hundred years before that. And the story starts with 4 travelers sailing across the Pacific Ocean. They were sailing from their home in Tahiti, and they were going to a group of islands called Hawaii. And where they landed was a beach in Hawaii that's called Waikiki. And when the people of Waikiki saw the travelers coming, they rushed down to the shore to welcome them. They had songs of welcome, they had fruit and flowers, and they welcomed the 4 travelers as they stepped out of their canoes and came onto the shore. And here's what they noticed about the travelers. First, they noticed they were tall. Second, they noticed they were strong. And third, they noticed they had kind eyes. And when they spoke, their voices were deep and soft and gentle. These were not men, and they were not women. They were mahu, people who were both in their hearts and in their minds and in their spirits. And the mahu had come, they had been granted a very special gift from the gods, and that was the gift of healing. And they had come to share that gift of healing. And they each healed in a very different way. So their leader, whose name was Kapai Mahu, that leader, they healed by laying on hands and healing people, whatever was hurting or sick in them, through laying on hands. Another one of the Mahu, named Kapuni, that means overspreading, and Kapuni could heal sicknesses of the spirit. In Kapuni's presence, someone who was sick in their spirit would have a feeling of peace spreading over them. And Kinohi was all-seeing, could even see inside your body. And if something inside your body was causing you pain, Kinohi could see it. And the last one, Kahaloa, could heal from afar. You didn't even need to be near Kahaloa. They could heal you from afar. And the Mahu had come to heal. And that's what they did. Anyone who had a problem in their bodies or in their spirits would come to the Mahu and be healed and be taught and be guided. But eventually the time came for them to move along to the next part of their journey. And the people of Waikiki wanted to raise a monument in memory of the time that they had spent. And so they went to a special mountain. Up at the top of that mountain was a stone called the Bell Stone. Striking the bell stone would make a sound that could be heard wah, 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 all around the land. And there were other boulders all around the bell stone. So they had brought ropes, and they tied them around the boulders, and they tugged, and they pulled, and they pushed, and they rolled, and they got 4 of those boulders down onto the beach where the Mahu had first come to greet them. And they arranged the stones, and they put special symbols on them to honor the Mahu for who they were. Not men, not women, but both. And Then the Mahu decided to give a gift. They would give their own gift of healing and put it in the stones. So they spoke some words of power and they sang some songs of power, and a whole moon went by for this ritual. They put their hands on the stone and their powers of healing went into those stones. And generation after generation after that would go to those stones for healing and to lay gifts and offerings to say thank you. But over time, new people came to the area, and these people had their own beliefs, and those beliefs did not include stones being able to heal people. And those beliefs did not include or accept beings who could be both male and female, both man and woman, both boy and girl. And since they couldn't understand or accept, the story got lost, and even the stones got lost. They were moved off the beach, they were put here and there, and at one point they were all reunited, but they were part of the basement of a bowling alley for some reason. And it took many, many years to get those stones back where they belonged. And that's where they are today, in a little park just off the beach of Waikiki. And there is a plaque there that tells the story of the Mahu and the gift of healing that they brought. So now the grandparents and parents of Hawaii can tell their children this story and hope that it leads to understanding about this great gift. And that is where our story ends for today. I hope it unfolds in your hearts until we're together again. And now we're going to sing the kids out to their next adventure of the morning.
We bless you on your journey through, from sheltering arms to the white sky blue, in your joyful jumps and your sad times too. You bless us by being you.
As our young ones file out, a lot of our wiggle goes with them, but not all of it. So I invite you to find that wiggle in your toe or your finger or your shoulders and settle into your seats, not fully still. And taking a comfortable breath, I invite you to join me in a shared silence. I invite you into the spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, God of many names, no name at all, and one abundant love. If we could play Carol of the Bells enough to start over this year, we would. Failing that, we come with fear, with grief, with gratitude and hope. Quench the fires in California. Help us to see and center those who seek to help, to open their doors, to make possible a way out of no way. Help us to sing songs about hearts beating as one, knowing that broken hearts still beat, and that broken hearts open more widely than they did before. We hold in our love all those struggling with loss and grief. We know that property damage is never more important than human dignity, never more important than connection, and yet we grieve all the places of memory that have been lost. Help us to see ourselves in the sloshing of the water in a bottle, all mixed up as part of the problem and badly needed now. Each of us, complainants and respondents both, all tied up in a web of mutuality. Help us to see ourselves in the joyful spinning, dancing of our young people who found just the right mythological creature to represent them. Help us to know ourselves in the happy tears of the moms who came yesterday to celebrate their young queer sons getting married at the big gay wedding day yesterday. Help us to see ourselves in the human diversity that followed just 10 minutes later in the elder butches who also wore suits but couldn't have more different stories than the two who preceded them. Help us to find our own stories and own hope and own joy all mixed up. May we find beauty. May we find embers of forgiveness, of love, and of life's longing for itself. Spirit of life that holds us in your palm of love, we gather, each of us, with stories all our own. And so I invite each of you to gather up whatever it is that is on your heart today, whether it's grief or gratitude for something or growth that is emerging in your own life. To hold it within you and to know that none of us are alone. And online, you're invited to share about your grief, your growth, or your gratitude this week in the chat. And here in the sanctuary, I invite you to come forward to light a candle or to raise a hand if you'd like a candle to be brought to you. Each of us gather in community knowing that we carry some part of the human story within us, and we witness to one another, holding each other's stories. Though we may not know the details, we know that their spark helps ignite our flame. I invite you now forward. For you who is seeking a new memory care unit for your mother who was displaced from the fires. For you who bought flowers, so many yesterday, for people you did not know. For you who is wrestling with grief or loneliness. For you impacted by addiction. For you just grateful for your grandchildren's health. For all that we carry in our hearts, and for all that breaks and makes us anew in this world, we give thanks. Amen. Ashe, and blessed be.
Please join in singing the musical meditation, Open My Heart. Open my heart, 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 open my heart. Before we sing it one final time, if you feel called by the music to sing harmonies, to improvise, let your voice go there. Here we go. Open my heart, 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 open my heart.
All that our church is and all that our church does is made possible by the time, talent, and treasure that we give to our shared mission. Members and friends support this congregation financially through recurring giving, and on Sundays, we also give through our shared collection. As part of the spiritual practice of generosity held collectively, 50 cents for every dollar given now to our offering will go to the UUA Disaster Relief Fund. The UUA Disaster Relief Fund enables our national association to support congregations, their members, and their community partners to recover, rebuild, and improve climate resiliency when disaster strikes. We make today's offering with compassion and solidarity for the people of Los Angeles affected by the many fires of this past week. You can give at rochesterunitarian.org/donate, or by Venmo, or here in person in our offering baskets. In the spirit of abundance and generosity, the offering will now be given and humbly received.
quiet voice and impeccable style. Don't let them ever steal your joy and your gentle ways that keep him from running wild. They can kick dirt in your face, dress you down and tell you that your place is in the middle when they hate the way you shine. I see you tugging on your shirt, trying to hide inside of it and hide how much it hurts. Let them laugh while they can. Let them spin, let them scatter in the wind. I have been to the movies and I've seen how it ends, and the joke's on them.
Good morning. This morning's reading is a Rosh Hashanah address from Rabbi Reuben Zellman, delivered at the congregation Shahar Zahav on Erev Rosh Hashanah 5767, which was 2006. We stand here tonight without knowing quite where we are. Or more precisely, we don't know quite when we are. Shabbat has come in, the sun has just gone over the horizon. During this evening's service, light gives way to dark, and the old year and the new year meet. We cannot ever pinpoint the exact moment when the old year disappears forever, but we know that there is a time at sundown when it is no longer the past year and it is not yet the year to come. It is old and new, both and neither one at the same time. For fleeting minutes on the evening of Rosh Hashanah, time and certainty are suspended, and we who have come to pray are lifted up into this twilight and its mystery. From the moment of birth and even before, we instantly and fervently delineate gender for every new human being. We ask, is it a boy or a girl? As the first question about a new baby. We continue to ask this question for every person in one way or another, almost every day, almost as long as we live. Nearly every form we fill out requires us to check a box, M or F. And if you do not pick one gender and only one, you do not get a driver's license or a mortgage or food stamps. We must usually pick a gender in order to get a job, travel, or enroll a child in school. Is it a boy or a girl? We are almost never allowed to imagine that there might be space in between. As twilight falls on Erev Rosh Hashanah, it is a most appropriate time to consider what happens in the in-between places. Jewish tradition has a unique relationship with twilight, that ethereal moment in every day when dark and light meet. The rising of the sun and its going down are moments that we cannot label with certainty, and all the more so the twilight of the evening of the new year. Our rabbis believed that twilight held great and unique power. Demons abounded in these minutes between night and day. One was especially vulnerable to the many forces of evil. Our sages of great intellect and tremendous spiritual gifts seem to have been a little bit afraid of what they could not define, like all of us are at different times. Our rabbis wanted to categorize and label. They desired to understand when day ended and when night began, which was which, and what to call it. But ultimately, many of them acknowledged they could not draw a simple line between one and the other. That middle place between light and dark could never be boxed in. It was not day, it was not night. Twilight was something else all its own. With their concern about demons, we might expect our rabbis would have warned us of the grave dangers of twilight. Perhaps we should not leave our houses at the time of sundown. Twilight could have been considered an inauspicious time for important activities. Perhaps the inscrutable twilight is when God hides God's face. In other words, our rabbis could have shut down twilight for us. They could have ruled it away, artificially dividing night from day with no possibilities of between time. But they didn't. Instead, the rabbis taught that twilight and dawn are the best times to pray. They concluded that these times that are in between and indefinable are when our prayers are most likely to be heard. The place in the middle that made them afraid was also the place where miracles were most likely, where divine forces rise, where transformation was most possible. And rather than shutting down the twilight hour, they opened it. They elevated it. It is not a degraded middle place. It is exceptionally holy. This approach to intermediate time is also, in many instances, Judaism's approach to intermediate space. Places in the middle are not places to rush through. They are places to be sanctified. At the Red Sea, our ancestors sang songs of praise to God for that miracle of passage. Thus, our people were named Ivrim, Hebrews, from the root avar, to cross. At our essence, Jews are a people who cross borders that previously seemed impossible. And when these boundary crossers came out from the sea, they did not emerge into their promised destination. They came forth into many years of wandering in a vast desert between one place and the next. This wilderness is where the majority of our Torah takes place. It is where we receive our laws and our ethical teachings, where God came down in fire in the great blast of the shofar. In between one place and another, our ancestors became the people that we are now. And here ends this morning's reading. And welcome to the second Sunday of our annual 3-church pulpit swap. So as Reverend Sherry explained, this year 4 preachers, myself, your own Reverends Sherry and AJ, and Reverend Lane May Reed from First Universalist, who you've already heard from if you were here last week, will rotate at our 3 churches between now and February 2nd. And all our preaching during this season of equity will be on gender. It's an area where we were all feeling called to preach in our congregations, and so we're doing that together. So you heard a message about gender last week, no matter which UU church you attended. And today you'll hear a message about gender. And next week, and for almost every week until February, no matter which UU church you attend, you'll hear a message reflecting on gender. It's sort of like this Pulpit Swap series makes these gender conversations as ubiquitous and inescapable as gender norms in our society. And I will tell you that there is nothing like having small children to make it clear how ubiquitous and inescapable the gender messaging of our society really is. As an example, I want to tell you a story about how I recently got extorted out of $12 at a Scholastic book fair. I will start by being honest. It is not that hard to get me to part with my dollars at a book fair. I am a real sucker for a kid who's excited to read, and I admit that I am usually that kid. But this $12 was spent on some of the non-book flim-flam that book fairs market to children during school hours, the posters and toys and cheap, shiny pens that break after one use. And I'm usually better than that. But I was lured in by my own righteousness, which is a great way to trap me. I was perusing the book fair with my kids who have both confirmed the boy status assigned to them at birth, but like not that fervently, you know? And they were both ignoring my declaration that 1 book each was all we would be leaving with, and begging for some of the aforementioned flim-flam. So my kindergartner was asking for a sparkly unicorn pen that only holds about 1 page of ink, because it's mostly filled with glitter water. And my 3rd grader had his eyes on a poster of two golden-colored horses running through a field of flowers with wind blowing back their manes that just had to hang over his bed and was definitely going to be worth putting holes in our 100-year-old plaster walls. So just as I was launching into my standard, we don't need any more bright, hot garbage speech that comes up whenever we're shopping, another kid strolled by to look at what they were holding. And this schoolmate, who is, we'll remind ourselves, too little to have come to this conclusion on his own, said, "You guys aren't going to buy that stuff, are you? That's girl stuff. Ew." Y'all, I brought that bright, hot femme garbage up to the register so fast. I paid $12 for a pen and a poster. And I loudly reminded my kids and their random schoolmate, and honestly probably the whole room, that one, you can like what you like, no matter what your gender is. And two, it's actually a big problem to treat stuff that people think isn't masculine enough as embarrassing or trash or not as good as serious manly stuff, like whatever superhero poster that kid was buying. When you do that, it's misogynist and it's anti-queer. It's one of those little violences that add up, that grow up to become big gender-based violence. And I cannot tell you how little they cared about my opinion or their schoolmates. Like, they just want to let the soft animals of their bodies love what they love. And what they love is overpriced, sparkly plastic. But later on, as I was writing this sermon, I asked them if they wanted to reflect on their gender in the way that I will ask you all to do shortly. And they did. They couldn't come up with much to answer the question of how their expression of their gender makes them like other people with the same gender. Spoiler alert. But when I asked how they're different from people with their same gender, my 5-year-old immediately said, "Well, I guess because I like sparkly unicorn pens." Gender expectations are so much more pervasive and invisible than we think, right? So the least we can do is make them less invisible, right? Let's talk about gender. And first things first, I think, what the hell even is gender? And that's something we could probably talk about for the rest of our lives. But for the purposes of being on the same page, we'll try and keep it a little briefer this morning. Gender is a social construct, which, yes, means that it's a creation of culture and relationship and self, but does not mean that it doesn't matter. Even when your gender doesn't matter a whole lot to you personally, gender as a construct matters a whole lot to us culturally. We typically talk about gender as a kind of dance between identity, one's innermost concept of self, and expression, the way one shows that self to the world. We have lots of expectations around both gender identity and gender expression, which you surely have encountered if you are a person. Studies show that children as young as 18 months begin to understand the gender expectations that are reinforced by the world around them. And so even if I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, our gender identity might be innate, down to our DNA even. When we say gender, we are, to be clear, not talking about biological sex. Those are two different constructs, although they do interact with one another. And this is complicated to pull apart, and the reason we have to start with what the hell even is gender. Because we live in a society where the dominant narrative for most of recent history has been that gender is both binary and derived directly from biological sex. If you've operated under this false assumption yourself, I can't blame you. It is invisible, and it is so pervasive, which is why we need to talk about it. We know, of course, that that is just one narrative among many across time and around the world. The stories of Indigenous people everywhere, like the one we heard from Sue this morning, include understandings of gender that are more expansive than a simple binary. And we know that even biological sex is not binary, in spite of the prevalence of unscientific propaganda to the contrary. Science tells us that biological sex is more than a binary. It encompasses reproductive anatomy, chromosomes, hormone levels, and what scientists call secondary sex characteristics, that are all affected by all of the above, and all of those things are measured on a spectrum, not a binary. And they don't align with one another in many, many human bodies. Expansiveness is a fundamental quality of life. We truly do contain multitudes. So, of course, gender is not one thing or two things, and neither is sex. Both are the interplay of 100,000 things that make us uniquely who we are and connect us to one another in this beautiful web. Complexity is not that conducive to control, though, is it? Systems of control do not care about nuance or the expansive chaos of life, the beauty of the multitudes as they're woven together, which is exactly why we here should care. We might be tempted to say, maybe we even have said, in times like these, can we just stop talking about pronouns and focus on the important stuff? Like we're facing a rising tide of fascism. Should we really be spending a month talking about gender? Aren't there more pressing needs? And that right there is some right-wing propaganda we are not going to fall prey to. You with me? Our refusal to notice gender, to talk about it and all its implications in spaces like this is not evidence of our organizational focus. It's nothing but a win for fascism. Of course this matters, and we have to talk about it because the stakes are too high to do anything but. Gender is a social construct, but it's not theoretically enforced. It's enforced in tiny, almost invisible ways, like the rainbow unicorn pen that maybe isn't for you. And it's enforced in serious, big, dangerous ways. It's lives at stake we're talking about. A strictly enforced binary code of gender is a pillar of fascism, and you will find it everywhere extreme right-wing tactics are used, including right here and now. It is enforced at the expense of real lives. Gender norms are enforced insidiously and also loudly and publicly. We know that there were hundreds of state and local laws proposed and or enacted just in the last year to limit the rights of trans and non-binary people, to limit anyone's right to act outside of their gendered expectations. Those laws are meant to enforce the narrative of gender that serves power. Laws that restrict access to public spaces, to healthcare, to education, laws that break up families and criminalize the very existence of trans and gender nonconforming people. And it's unfortunately not just these new laws that are threats to anyone who is living outside of the box that gender would put them in. Trans people are twice as likely as the general public to live in poverty, 3 times as likely to be unemployed. They're more likely to experience mistreatment or lack of treatment by healthcare providers. The majority of trans children in school experience bullying, with over a quarter of them experiencing it as physical assault because they are not conforming to gender expectations. Every major medical body in this country supports giving transgender youth the opportunity to transition medically. Gender-affirming care like hormone replacement and puberty blockers are well studied and have been in common use for nearly a century, and most importantly, are life-saving. The risk of suicide attempts of trans and non-binary teens is around 40%, compared to 5% in the general population. The one treatment that we know works for lowering that incredibly high risk is affirming and supporting trans kids' identities. In fact, the National Center for Transgender Equality reports that trans youth whose families and communities are supportive are half as likely to attempt suicide. They're 18% less likely to experience homelessness and 20% less likely to experience trauma-related mental illness as well. And this is heavy, hard stuff. So I hesitate to even say it, but I need us to sit with the hard truth that all of this is being done in our name as people of faith. The gender-conforming agenda, which is to say the anti-trans agenda, is a church-based movement. We, as a church whose acceptance of LGBTQ people has long been something we've taken for granted, have to talk about this. We can't afford to stay silent. We cannot afford to just hope that our silence implies support. We have to be ready to shout our benevolent rage into sanctuaries and schools and homes and city halls. Our role as a church right now, seeing this emerge in our name, is to let the chorus of our rage give birth to praising. To talk about gender because we can't afford not to. So, my cisgender friends, our siblings' lives and our own moral integrity is what's at stake. I need us to remember that this is not a frivolous distraction in the least. And while I'm speaking to my cisgender friends, talking about gender should probably start with some actual reflection on our own. Because sometimes we fit so well in the box that we forget the box is even there. But when the box is harming people, right? It takes all of us pushing against the edges of it so that all of us can be free. So that we can maybe imagine a bigger box. Or, if you really want to get radical, no walls around us at all. So, here are some questions we could be reflecting on with some regularity, especially those of us who have found the gender we were assigned to be a comfortable enough fit that we don't think about it that often. And you can answer these questions with your inside voice, or even just take note of them to reflect on later. Here's what I want us to ask ourselves. First, what are the gender-based expectations of me? And am I meeting them? And do I want to be? What do I have in common with other people who share my gender? What makes me feel different from other people who share my gender? Do people ever misgender me? Do they get my gender wrong? And how does it feel when they do? And finally, how could I describe my gender without using binary gendered words like man or woman, boy or girl, masculine or feminine? Are there more complex words I could use? So my friend and colleague C.B. Beale has this analogy that they often use when talking about the expansiveness of gender with big groups that I think would be helpful to us this morning. So imagine with me that you're at coffee hour after your first Sunday in a new church. Maybe you're about to be. And like most churches, the coffee setup is pretty basic. Maybe not your church. I don't know how elaborate it is back by the kitchen, but we're going to imagine at this church it's a very basic setup. And so when a welcoming member comes up and offers you a cup of coffee, they ask, how do you take it? And I would like you to imagine that when your options are really cream or sugar or black, what do you choose? Maybe you know right away because it's what you always choose. Maybe you have to think it over a little bit. Maybe you're going to decline altogether because none of those sound great for you. Okay, so now we're going to imagine a new scenario together. You walk into your local coffee shop, and there's an enormous menu of options looming above you. There's flavorings and sweeteners, syrups and nut milks and all manner of hot and cold preparation. And not just coffee now, but there's tea and juice and maybe even some pastries on offer. The choices are almost infinite, the combinations you could make. It's like coffee factorial, a math word that I don't know if I'm using correctly here. So now what do you choose? Maybe it's the same thing. But maybe it got more complicated. For example, I will go with something iced if it's available, like whatever newest flavor has popped on the menu, and almond milk if I have the choice. And maybe you never wanted coffee at all, but you'll take a matcha tea if it's up there. Most of us, though never all, can fit ourselves into the choices available to us. But when we have the freedom to expand, we usually do. We find that we're infinitely more complex than expected when we're allowed to be. The world is complicated, and this is why we sing its praises, right? It's not simplicity, it's not the rigid austerity of the earth that we sing about in our hymns. We sing out hill and dale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light, because it's nature's complexity that brings forth our praising. It is, as Rabbi Zellman put it, the in-between spaces, the nuance of creation that we sanctify. So when we ask ourselves as people of faith, what is natural? The answer is that diversity is natural, abundance is natural. The world we sanctify is one of sunrise and twilight, and shores where land and sea overlap. It's the scent of anticipation between clear skies and the storm that's coming. The moment when simple white light gets refracted into a rainbow of color, and all the space between birth and death. These are natural and worthy of our praise. And if preachers in America are going to stand in their people's pulpits and talk about gender as a denial of the sanctity of its abundance, then we had better stand firm in ours and proclaim it. We had better stop hoping that our allyship is taken for granted and start shouting our rage and our praise from the rooftops. That all of us, including all of us, and especially all of us who are not conforming to the gendered expectations put on them, are people who are worthy and holy and divine. We could spend the whole morning and maybe our whole lives talking about what gender means, and I really hope that we do. Because when we ask what does it mean to be faithful, to be religious, and answer that it is to let love speak truth to power, we have to talk about gender, because when we refuse, we cede faith to that realm of hatred and willful ignorance. And what sort of faith is it to deny someone's existence? We can, in faith, do more than quiet support. We can do better than tacit acceptance. And my trans and non-binary and gender non-conforming siblings this morning, I need you to hear me. You are not a hardship. You are a blessing. Your being is not a burden for us. It is liberatory. It is praiseworthy. It is sanctified. And I hope that we never stop talking about it. May it be so, and amen. And friends, will you rise in your bodies or your spirits and sing together our closing hymn, For the Beauty of the Earth?
as we end our service, source of all, to thee we raise. If you're able and help, and please raise the chairs with arms and stack them if you will and if you can. Please join us in saying our chalice extinguishing words, which are on the screen. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts till we are together again. And we'd like to extend our appreciation for Reverend Eileen for joining us this morning and afternoon. Please offer us a benediction.
I want to offer as a benediction this morning these words from the Reverend M. Barclay. Every time the word gay rolls off my tongue, when the words queer or intersex, trans or non-binary or bisexual bless my lips, no matter what I'm talking about, I am also, always, sending a love letter, casting a lifeline, praying a prayer, and yes, obviously, waving a flag. So we say them in every form they take across languages and cultures. We say them as early and as often as we can. We say them especially when they're not welcome. We say them with all the love we've got, and we will never, ever stop.
Aren't you, boy, with your quiet voice and impeccable style?